We've been looking at the leg lock system. We've seen there's a general leg lock system, and within that general system there are three subsystems: cross ashigarami, the straight ashigarami, and reverse ashigarami. One of the most important points that we're trying to make as we work through this instructional series is the idea that for any given scenario, whether it be cross, straight, or reverse ashigarami, there's always going to be one central problem in that scenario which guides, informs, and directs the action between the two athletes. So if we have Carl and Bernardo in a cross ashigarami situation, it's well known. Feet on the inside.
So he's doing it too.
Yeah. Okay. From here, it's well known what the two athletes want to do in this situation. Okay, Bernardo wants to expose his opponent's heel and control the leg with two legs wrapped tightly around his opponent's leg. He can have his legs in a variety of configurations. Kawasaro's intention is always to prevent heel exposure, and he does that by turning away. This creates the so-called turnout problem. Okay? From Bernardo's perspective, the whole question of how he's going to successfully heel hook in this situation comes down to, will he be able to overcome the turnout problem? One way he can do this, as we saw earlier, was to control the secondary leg. That prevents his opponent from turning out. But when he goes to release the secondary leg, now the same problem occurs. This is the so-called release problem that we spent some time investigating. In a situation where we had a straight ashigarami, Carl with a straight ashigarami, release. Carl with a straight ashigarami on Bernardo. Here, it was a different problem. When Kawasara goes to apply a heel hook, all the pressure is going in this direction, and now we run into the problem of a shared spiral. So both athletes start spiraling in the same direction. If they just continue to spiral, nothing really results. It's not a successful break. So there has to be some kind of dealing with this central problem, the problem of shared spirals. We're going to start looking now at reverse ashigarami, the third of the three subsystems in the general system. We're going to see that there's a new problem that starts to emerge in this interesting and different position. And this problem will motivate most of the ways we go to act and behave in this position. First, let's have a look at what the reverse ashigarami is. Okay? Almost all the various ashigaramis involve two athletes facing each other. Reverse ashigarami is the only one where that's not true. I face the same direction as my opponent is facing. In a situation where my opponent is down, we sit on top of our training partner and we have both legs in front of us. There's good news and bad news here. The good news is you have easy access to both of your opponent's legs. That's a good thing. Okay, that lets us work with the principle of double trouble, that both of my opponent's legs can be controlled at the same time. The bad news is my opponent's legs can easily be locked in a triangle or crossed feet or any other configuration he wants so that one leg can defend the other. The fundamental problem of this position is always the problem of crossed legs. I want a leg lock of some kind on the leg that's between my legs. I have an ashigarami, two legs around one of my opponent's legs in this position, but he has an easy ability in this situation, with the legs are right next to each other, to lock up his legs defensively. That's not true in the case of the other ashigaramis. In a straight ashigarami, I'm between his legs. Okay? So it's hard for him to access one leg to the other because my body's an obstruction. It's hard for him to get one leg to defend the other. In the case of a cross ashigarami, it makes no sense for him to cross his legs in this situation. That's actually helping me out. He'd be doing me a favor if he did this. Okay? And this way he's actually given me the leg that I wanted. It makes much more sense for him now to split his legs and start the action of turning away. That's really much more in his interest. So my opponent can't really use one leg to defend the other very successfully here. That gives me what I want. He can't do it in the case of a straight ashigarami because my body is in between his legs, and as a result it's hard for him to use one leg to defend each other. When we go to reverse ashigarami, now he can easily use one leg to defend each other. Okay? If he didn't do this, then it would be the easiest thing in the world for me to go immediately into various attacks on my training partner's legs. I have a leg available now to go into multitudes of attacks from this position. Okay? He knows that, and so he will always go into lock and defend his endangered leg, the leg between mine, with his second leg. So once again, we have a primary leg that is between my legs, it's inside an ashigarami, and we have a secondary leg defending the primary leg. Okay? The question is, how are we going to work in this set of circumstances to control our opponent and ultimately get through to a submission win? Well, let's first talk about the notion of control. How do I go to control this position? The first thing you're going to notice about this variation of reverse Ashigurami is that it's inherently unstable. If Kawamoto tilts left, it's going to off-balance me. If he tilts right, that too is going to off-balance me. This is an inherently unstable position. Now, I can react to that by spreading my base. That's not really the wisest idea, because now there's a great deal of space for him to start sliding his knee out. Okay? So the first question is, how are we going to get some kind of stability here? Okay? Well, a good place for us to start is through his legs. Okay? I'm going to put my hand here on my training partner's knee and my second hand here on my training partner's heel. So I take a 2-on-1 grip on my training partner's primary leg. Then I take an action of scissoring my legs. I put a wedge around my training partner's thigh and I hold in just like so. It's true, I've narrowed my base. But on the other hand, I've got a much better control over my training partner's legs. Okay? Now, to go to work in situations like this, we've seen stability as a potential problem. If I see my training partner trying to off-balance me, I will use my legs reflexively, but always come back to a wedge position. Okay? So if I feel I'm going to lose base to my left, I'll put my foot out just briefly and then bring the wedge back in. If I feel I'm going to lose base to my right, I'll put my right hand and right foot out to base and then return. But I never relinquish control of the knee. Okay, that's always my primary thing. I can relinquish control of the ankle briefly, but not the knee. The moment the knee is released, any kind of off-balancing results in a loss of the leg overall. So, with regards to stability, I can't be naive and just have my legs wide. It's not going to work at all. We want to first and foremost put a wedge underneath the knee with our wrist. I go in wrist deep on my training partner's knee, and I bring my elbow back to myself, and I lift and compress the ankle just like so, and I put a strong wedge effect by having my 2 feet pointing in roughly the same direction across my training partner's body. Then from here, reflexively, I use basing with hand and feet to make sure that I'm stable in this position long enough to get the job done. Now, at some point, I want to get a more genuine kind of stability than this. So what I'm going to do is put my knee down on the floor, just like so. I'm going to take my arm and I'm going to scoop my training partner's leg so that both legs are controlled. And then from here, I'm going to pitch down to a hip into a stable position. If my opponent tries to move in this position, both legs are controlled, and it's very, very difficult for him to move successfully. If I release one of my opponent's legs, now Kawamoto can start the action of getting up on top of me and causing problems. So a very important element of this position is this idea of double trouble, that I want to control both of my opponent's legs in a kind of double leg tackle position that prevents my opponent from getting up on top of me. Okay? So let's look again at the basic problems that we're dealing with here. Okay? First, the nature of the position, reverse Ashigurami. This is unique amongst all the Ashiguramis. It's the only one when facing away from my opponent's body. All the other ones I face towards my opponent. Okay? The central problem we're dealing with here is the problem of locked legs. The very nature of this position means my opponent can easily lock his legs defensively, and now the primary leg is defended well by the secondary leg. This is unique to the situation. Okay? First things first, we need to go in and effectively control the legs. The leg we want to control is the primary leg. So I take a wrist-deep wedge and put it underneath my training partner's knee. I take a grip on my training partner's heel and I pull everything up towards me to tighten and cinch the position that I'm in. I want to scissor my legs like so. I don't want my knees wide apart. I want my knees pointing in the same direction to form effective wedges around my opponent. Initially, stability is offered by the feet. My opponent goes to move around. I put feet, hand, but at some point, I want to get them to work, so I can't be worried too much about stability. So I take my knee and I put my knee right there underneath my training partner's buttocks. I take my second arm and I lock, tackling both legs, and I go down to a shoulder and a hip, and we just lock up like so. Okay? When Kawamoto goes to move, get up on top, you can't do it with both legs controlled. So now we've achieved stability and control of both of my training partner's legs. We're looking at reverse Ashigurami, the third of the three subsystems that in unison form the general leg lock system. We've looked at the idea of stability and control. That's always our first concern. Control first, submission second. Okay? We've seen that reverse Ashigarami is quite unique. It's the only, of all the major forms of Ashigarami, it's the only one where we face away from our opponent, as opposed to a normal situation where we face towards our opponent. We've seen, as always, our primary goal is to get control of our opponent. That's relatively easy to do in the case of reverse Ashigarami because both legs are directly in front of us. So we can use the principle of double trouble to tackle both legs and start looking for stability. One way to find stability is to go down to a hip rather than balancing precariously on top of our training partner. Now, a very interesting thing about reverse Ashigarami is that it starts to bring in different forms of leg lock than we've been looking at so far. When I was beginning in Jiu-Jitsu, leg lock mastery was always understood as who knew the most leg locks. Okay, if you knew 100 leg locks, you were more of a leg lock master than the guy who knew 10 leg locks. Okay, a big part of my approach to leg locking has been to try to change that perception. If you look at my students, literally 95% of their leg lock submissions come from two moves, an inside heel hook and an outside heel hook. They don't know a vast number of finishes. In truth, I could sit here all day and teach you literally hundreds of different exotic leg locks, and it would do absolutely nothing to make you better at finishing people in top level competition. I would rather you had two high percentage leg locks that really work all the way up to world championship level than you have 1,000 ineffective exotic leg locks that couldn't finish my grandmother. Let's go into this now. We're going to introduce two more leg locks, the knee bar and the figure four toe hold. In truth, my leg lock system really works around inside heel hook, outside heel hook as the vast majority of finishes, but these are supplemented by knee bar finishes and figure four toe holds, which also play a useful role in the leg lock system. Beyond that, I don't really teach many others. We've seen from a reverse Ashigarami situation, we first want some kind of stability. We saw as our opponent locks up his legs, this creates the first and what I believe is the central problem of the reverse Ashigarami system, the problem of tied legs or crossed legs or triangle legs. The primary leg is being defended by the secondary leg. Once my opponent gets into this kind of defensive arrangement, now he can start to destabilize me in this position and hopefully from his perspective, get his legs free. I want the exact opposite. I want to tie his legs up, put a knee down on the floor, tackle both legs and get down to a stable position on my hip. Okay? Now, we've got two legs in front of us. You guys all know that the real game here is to get to the primary leg. That's the leg that's actually inside my Ashigarami. An interesting thing about figure four toe holds is they are one of the very few locks which can reliably and effectively be used without the use of an Ashigarami. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply a figure four toe hold on my training partner's secondary leg. The primary leg is still controlled by my Ashigarami. The secondary leg is right there in front of me, ready to be taken advantage of. I'm going to take a hand through, and I'm going to take a hold of my training partner's foot in a very particular way. I want to take the smallest knuckle of my pinky finger to the first knuckle of my pinky finger to the first knuckle of my training partner's smallest toe. So I come through and chop right there. You'll see a direct correlation between my first pinky knuckle and the first knuckle of his smallest toe. Don't sell yourself short. Don't grab the short end of the lever. When we started this DVD, we talked about the idea of lever and fulcrum, and we said it would inform much of what we went over in this DVD series. It's so important that we grab properly to maximize the use of leverage. So often I see people grab in inefficient ways halfway down the lever. This may not look like much, but at World Championship level, the difference between this and this can be the difference between a gold medal and nothing. Let's make sure we grip properly. First knuckle to first knuckle, right in place. Some people like to use a thumb, some people don't. Generally, it's correlated with the size of your training partner's foot. The bigger the foot, the more difficult it is to cover it with the thumb. From here, I go through and I take my arm and I go elbow deep at the ankle. Don't come up here on the shin. When you grip on the shin, you can see a huge amount of daylight between my two hands and his foot. That's not a good thing. I come around elbow deep and thread all the way up there on my own wrist. So there's very little daylight between my wrist and forearm and his feet. I start an action of pushing with the left hand in towards my training partner's buttocks. And then the most important part. My left hand is my push hand, but the right hand forms a frame and that becomes my pulling arm. The key is that from here, I push with the left hand and I pull with the right elbow. As we saw in earlier segments of this DVD series, the key to tearing the ligaments of the feet, ankles, and knee consists in coupled forces, where I have forces going in opposing directions. Just as you tear a piece of paper by shredding in different directions, so too with joints. If I simply push on my training partner's foot with no pull, nothing will happen. If I just pull with no push, nothing will happen. Only the combination of a push with my left hand and a pull with my right elbow will get the desired results. So what we like to do is to take our training partner's big toe and push it straight towards his tailbone. Then from here, I come back in the opposite direction with my elbow so that I get a push with the left hand towards the tailbone and a pull of my right elbow back towards my own jaw. This combination of forces creates a tremendous torque, which is directly felt on the ankle, much more than the knee. Once again, from a situation where my training partner has his legs locked defensively, I reach and I grab smallest or first knuckle to first knuckle, just like so. Once I make that catch, I bring the foot in towards me. I bring my frame arm to the ankle, not the shin. I go through and my hand locks right over the wrist. Don't grab down on your forearm where you can see a vast amount of daylight between your hands and his feet. Grip up high, just like so. Start with a push towards your training partner's tailbone. Then go with a pull of your elbow towards your own jaw. The only way my opponent can defend this lock is to take his primary leg and push on my hands. If he can do this, he can break the lock. When he does it, however, he exposes what I really wanted all along, the primary leg. From here, I grip the heel and then post it. We take our hand in the shape of a V and block our training partner at the ankle. And as a result, I can swim around my training partner's body and put my hand on my own thigh. Then from here, I lock the figure of 4 and I point my right knee directly towards his tailbone. As a result, I can drive my pelvis forward. Always make sure that we use the single most important braking fulcrum in the human body, the bones of the hip. I do not position my opponent's knee in the middle of my legs. That would use the soft adductor muscles as the braking fulcrum, not very efficient. I want to use his leg across my hip bone. So I put my hand on my own thigh, I close my elbow. The action of closing the elbow puts tremendous tension and removes all the slack from my training partner's knee. The last danger is that my opponent will kick this leg free and start to escape by coming up to his knees. We don't want that. So let's make sure at the last second we always connect his foot to our body to prevent that from happening. Now, directionality of force. My knee straight to his tailbone. From here, I lock on board. Watch my left elbow take the slack out of the joint. Remember, every time we go to break legs, take the slack out of the joint first, then break your opponent. As Carl tries to move away, both legs are controlled. Go to move away, Carl. It's so difficult. This is a true example of double trouble in operation. Now, from here, I drive the pelvis forward and we get a strong finish. Do you remember what we said earlier about the idea of follow-through? About how one of the keys to strong braking is the idea of not going to a breaking point, but through a breaking point. This is a good example. let's find the breaking point. It's there. Now, if I release the leg, you can clearly see that I can still move a long way through the breaking point. This means we'll have a decisive break should the occasion demand it. Okay. I'll just go lying down. So let's have a look at the Ushiro Sankaku or reverse Ashigarami position. A big danger here is a strong opponent like Bernardo Faria will put his hands on my back and start pushing, and that will quickly destabilize me and put me on my hip on the ground. This is not a position I want to be in. Okay, it's very, very easy now for my opponent to start coming up on top of him. So one of the big things you want to guard against is having people coming up on top by pushing and sliding the hips. This is particularly true with strong opponents who have a good ability to destabilize. Okay, so how can we ensure this kind of thing doesn't happen? Okay, we've seen a big part of it is this use of a wedge in here. Then the use of our hand on the ankle to tie everything in close. The more Bernardo's legs extend down in this direction, the easier it is to start pushing me and taking me out of balance. So we want to draw everything up towards us. We lock in and control. Now I turn my knees so they're an effective wedge. If Bernardo takes my body to his left, there's things we can do from here, don't get me wrong, but it's not as desirable as falling across the body. In these situations, I can fully determine where we fall by putting my knee on the floor. From here, when Bernardo goes to push me off, I lock the second leg. Now, as strong as Bernardo is, when he goes to get up, it's incredibly difficult with both legs controlled. All this time, it's a relatively easy thing to control my training partner, gripping precisely on the toe line. I lock up. Then from here, we start with a push and finish with a pull. Bernardo has to use his primary leg to start kicking out and defend the secondary leg. That's again exactly what we're looking for. We take this grip, pass it around, and then from here, I take the slack out of the joint by closing the elbow. I lock a full Sankaku, my knee points at my training partner's tailbone, and we drive forward for the finish. We've been looking at the reverse Ashigarami position, the third of the three subsystems which in unison make the general leg lock system. Let's go further into this reverse Ashigarami and start to look at some of the main techniques and tactics we use from this position. We've seen the first issue here is that of stability. Okay, I can't just be shaken off down to the floor where I no longer control opponent with body weight, and now you can actually threaten my back in this situation. It's not good. The second issue is the primary concern that I have as the attacker, that my opponent can lock his primary leg with his secondary leg and defend it. Here you can clearly see the primary leg is defended by the secondary leg in this triangle. Reacting to this problem of crossed or triangle legs motivates and gives direction to this position. We've seen, once we've established stability, most of the time I like to see my athletes come down to the floor, knee first, tie up both legs, utilizing the principle of double trouble, and falling down to a stable position from where they can attack the figure four toe hold on the secondary leg. When his opponent goes to defend, a dilemma is created. If my opponent doesn't defend, I'll break him right here. If he does defend, I'll break him here. Okay? So it's a nice dilemma between the two legs. Is that the only way I can operate? Absolutely not. One excellent way for us to look at this position, once my opponent starts locking up and defending, is to see opportunities on both sides of my opponent's body. One of the really interesting things about the reverse Ashigarami is that it's a gateway position. There's a reason why I taught it third out of the 3 subsystems of Ashigurami, because reverse Ashigurami is a gateway to the first 2. The beauty of reverse Ashigurami is that it's a symmetrical position between my training partner's legs. That means that if my opponent's legs are unlocked, if I fall inside his legs, I fall directly into a straight Ashigurami variation, which we call outside Ashigurami. If, on the other hand, I fall the other way, I fall directly into cross Ashigurami. The important point here is that if I have a reverse Ashigurami and I fall either left or right, I fall into the 2 other systems of the leg lock system in general. So I can play this knowledge against my opponent in ways that are extremely useful. From reverse Ashigurami, when I see my opponent defend himself, one of my favorite strategies here is to use a simple method of untying my training partner's legs. That simple method involves me first tying up my opponent's primary leg. Then I reach down and I get a hold of my training partner's secondary leg right down at the toe line. I catch it and I pull the leg in. Okay? When I go to use this method, my hand switches from the knee, I lift, and I go underneath the heel, just like so. Okay? So my hand catches at my training partner's heel and toe. So the grip we're employing starts at the toes and goes to the heel. Now, when Carl goes to make his legs strong and resistant, the directionality of force is not to pull towards me. Make a strong leg, Carl. I can never pull straight back into his legs. It's like trying to pull into the strength of squatting or leg pressing. It's very, very difficult. What I do is I pull across my center line, and that immediately weakens my opponent's ability to resist me. When he goes to straighten his legs from here, it's almost impossible. Okay? We keep everything in close, putting him in a mechanically weak position. As a result, now we can reliably untie our training partner's legs. Okay? So once again, I have an opponent with a strong defensive structure here. As always, I start by going over my opponent's knee, like so. I catch my training partner and I start the action of lifting and I expose my training partner's heel. I get a hold of heel and toes. He tries to resist me here, and it's a very easy thing for me to untie his legs. Essentially, you're untying the knot of your opponent's legs. Okay, so once again, I'm in the reverse Ashigurami position. My opponent is defending the primary leg with the secondary leg by locking a triangle. I have to be able to untie that triangle. I go through on my training partner, I catch my training partner at the toe line, I start the action of lifting across, I catch the heel. Now Carl locks up his legs as tight as he can. He won't be able to stop me from pulling across and untying the legs. Once the legs are untied, it's time to go to work. I'm going to release my training partner's secondary leg. I'm going to bring the primary leg back to me, and I'm going to put my biceps over the toes. That's a very important detail. I enter at the toes, not the heel. Biceps cover the toes, and then from here, the heel goes in. Now, I want a controlled descent to the floor. That's a very important thing. So often I see people get this position and they simply fall like a brick down to the mat and they lose control of the leg. That's not what we want. A controlled descent goes like this. I take my foot to my training partner's hip and I put my knee on the floor. The knee becomes the elbow. The hands lock and we have outside Ashigurami. From here, we lock it up. Everything's extraordinarily tight. I put my head over my training partner's foot and we lift up for the finish. As always, we're finishing on our elbow. The inside leg pressures down on my training partner's knee. My hips come off the floor and we lift the heel for the finish to create that coupled force going in opposite directions for a strong break. Let's have a look at this whole sequence again. We start off in reverse Ashigurami. My opponent locks up his legs defensively. From here, I put a wedge over the top, catch my training partner's toe line, and draw the leg up towards me. I go through and I catch my training partner at the heel. Even when his legs are locked defensively from here, I pull across and I untie my training partner's legs. From here, I want to go to a straight Ashigurami. That means I'm going to have to put my knee on the floor and fall in this direction. But I don't want to go down to the floor until I have the heel hook in place. So I bring my body so I can look at my training partner's shoelaces. If you try to get a heel hook from here, it'll never happen. I have to be able to look into my training partner's shoelaces. I immediately put my bicep on top of my training partner's toes. So if he goes to lock the triangle a second time, it's all interfered with by my arm. The heel hook is essentially in place. I want a controlled descent to the mat. The foot starts it. The knee is next. Then my hands lock, my feet come close together, and I go down to the mat. As Carl tries to come up and defend himself, it's so difficult, and we get a bone-breaking finish down on the floor. We've been looking at the reverse ashigarami. We've seen that reverse ashigarami can be used to function as a gateway to the other two ashigaramis, straight ashigarami family and cross ashigarami. Let's look now how instead of using heel hooks, we can employ the figure 4 toe hold with a lot of effect. From the reverse ashigarami position, we know that it's very much in my opponent's interest to lock his legs defensively. This defensive lock is what generates most of the action in this position. Okay? If my opponent didn't lock his legs defensively in this position, I would just go straight into a finish from here. It would be so easy. I just go into heel hooks here, toe holds here, knee bars, whatever you feel like. Okay? What makes this position interesting is that your opponent can defend himself by locking the legs here. Okay? This is the primary problem associated with the reverse ashigarami position. We've seen different ways to deal with this. We can fall over to the side and then play a dilemma between a figure 4 toe hold on one leg and a knee bar on the other. We've just looked at the idea of untying the knot of our training partner's legs by coming in here at the toes and then exposing the heel and untying our training partner's legs. We saw, as a result of this, that we could go directly into a heel hook attack from this position. Okay? Heel hooks aren't your only option. We can also employ the figure 4 toe hold from this position. I'm particularly enthusiastic about teaching this position to you because this will illustrate a lot about the nature of twisting locks, in particular twisting leg locks, which can be of benefit to people who compete in tournaments where heel hooks are illegal. The general point that I want to raise here is that the mechanics of a figure 4 toe hold and the mechanics of a heel hook are directly related to each other. They both involve a push on the toes and a pull on the heel simultaneously. The only difference is the mechanism by which you do it. In the case of a heel hook, it's done through the arm and the torso. In the case of the figure 4 toe hold, it's done through the hands, wrists, and arms. Okay? There's a sense in which the figure 4 toe hold is just a heel hook applied with your hands and arms. So, from the situation where my opponent's locked up defensively, we know that we start the ball rolling by peeling one leg across the center line to expose the heel of the second leg. From here, we go in and we catch our training partner. We always do so in the most mechanically efficient fashion. Don't just grab anywhere. Make sure you're precise. The smallest knuckle to the smallest knuckle. Okay? We go through, don't put your arm anywhere, don't go around the shin, go all the way up to your training partner's elbow. When I sit down to the floor, I want to keep my opponent's foot as close to my hips as possible. The more my training partner's leg extends, the harder it becomes to finish in this position. So I want to make sure that I keep his toes down in the pocket of my hip. As a result, I have two arms here. I have a pushing hand and a pulling hand. Okay? The push hand pushes my training partner's toes towards his tailbone. Now I take my elbow and I sweep it down to the end of the lever. Watch my right elbow. My right elbow goes in. My head follows it, and as a result, 100% of my body weight goes into what can only be described as a heinous leg lock. Okay? There's true breaking pressure here that'll match any heel hook. Now, I've taken Calmasaro to the breaking point here, but you can clearly see that there's a huge amount of follow through, which will signify what could be a catastrophic break. Once again, from a situation where I start off in reverse Ashigarami. First, we need to untangle those legs. We catch, lift across the center line, and catch the heel. As Kamasara goes to recover the position, he finds it very, very difficult. Now I release the secondary leg, and I catch the primary right there at the toes. Once I do so, I throttle around, I put my knee on the floor, I push his toes into my hip. As a result, I can back heel with my legs to tie everything up. My head goes around the corner and we get tremendous braking pressure. Don't look at the lock. Bring everything out and around, and that's where the braking power comes from. The pull of my elbow. Okay? But how you can do this? You're going to do it on top. You're going to do it on top. So, let's have a look at some of these key features. Starting off, sitting on our training partner, legs up. Now, we're going to take our hand and we're going to catch our training partner with the toes, this hand here. Good. And we're going to pull across the center line. You can see that this begins to untangle our training partner's legs. Now, our other hand is going to catch our training partner at the heel, securing a good grip, and now we separate the legs like so. He's now successfully untangled those defensive legs. Now it's time to devote our attention to the primary leg. So we release the secondary, and our hand goes in and catches our training partner all the way so that the smallest knuckle of the smallest finger goes in to the first knuckle of the smallest toe. Now, from here we go through and lock the figure of 4, making sure that we minimize the space between ourselves and our opponent's foot by bringing the hand up all the way like so. Now, our knee is going to come down to the mat, and we're going to fall onto our right hand side. Our legs are going to lock, and then from here we're going to keep our opponent's foot as close to our hip as possible. From here we're going to bring our elbow down to our training partner's heel, so that when we push with the right hand and pull with the left, we get tremendous braking pressure. And it all starts with the head. He's going to look away from his opponent and he's going to look towards my hand. When you see Bernardo's head moving, here's a key detail. What I can't have is the head stationary, the hands stationary and the head moving away from the hands. The distance between the hands and the head never changes. As the head moves away, he pushes in like so, and there we get the break. Okay?
Yeah.
Very good.
This makes complete sense, right? When I move my head, my elbow automatically opens, right?
Ultimately, it's about your elbow coming down to the end of the lever and the elbow sweeping back with your head. Notice how the elbow moves with the head. Here's the head. As the head moves back, the elbow follows and the hand pushes in here. So the right pushes, the left pulls, and we get a very strong break. Well done, Bernardo.
Man, that's impressive.
We've been looking at the reverse Ashigarami position, the third of the various subsystems that comprise the general system of leg locking. We're trying to say that reverse Ashigarami has some unique properties. One is obvious, the fact that I'm facing away from my opponent instead of facing towards him. Anyone can see that. Less obvious is the idea that this position functions as a perfect gateway into the other two subsystems. If I have this position, it's very easy for me to fall into straight Ashigaramis. It's equally easy for me to fall into cross Ashigaramis. From a situation like so, it's not difficult for us to start that action of untangling our training partner's legs. Okay? Every so often, however, you will come up against a very, very strong legged opponent, and you will feel it's difficult to untangle the legs in these situations. Okay? Whenever we see that, an excellent way for us to operate is to catch differently. I catch my training partner at the heel, and I catch here at the ankle. As Kawasawa makes a strong resistance, I want to focus on lifting his ankle over my knee. So his ankle goes from below my knee to above my knee. Once it's above my knee, he can never return it because my knee functions as a wedge underneath his calf muscle. Now, controlling my training partner's 2 feet, I bring my left knee underneath my training partner's left knee, just like so. Okay? I start an action of turning, and I pop my knee through my training partner's hip. And as a result, we find ourselves in the perfect position to close the figure of 4, the senkaku, on the inside of our training partner's legs. Now watch my right hand. My right hand releases my training partner's foot and catches a 2-on-1 grip on my training partner's knee. As a result, I can go forward on my training partner and capture the heel. Now, it's very much in Kawamosaru's interest to keep his foot moving in this direction. Okay? Once I get control of my training partner, I just keep the ankle underneath my armpit. I don't release it. I release my hand, but not his foot, and I come forward and I collect the second leg. And now we've fallen into a perfect attacking position. I now have the cross ashigarami with both of my training partner's ankles laced, and it's a very, very controlling position for me to work from. When he tries to move away from me, it's shockingly difficult. And from here, the whole cross ashigarami system goes into operation. Once again, using reverse ashigarami as a gateway to other forms of ashigarami. We start off with the reverse ashigarami. My opponent's legs are locked up well defensively. Normally from here, we like to untie our training partner's legs so we can go into various forms of leg lock activity. Okay, figure 4 toe holds, heel hooks, etc., etc. Sometimes it's difficult to do this. Whenever you feel it's very difficult, catch the heels on both of my training partner's legs and I put his ankle over my knee. Once we get to a position like this, it's not difficult for us to make transfers into some of our favorite leg lock attacking positions. I need to start a general action of turning into my training partner. I go over the top of my training partner's ankle. I could just tie it up in this position, or I could just hold underneath, just like so. This is my favorite way to make the turn. Watch my left knee close in as a wedge underneath my training partner's legs, and now I sit to my buttocks. And the most important thing is my right knee will go inside my training partner's hip and thigh, just like so. When he goes to turn into me, my knee makes it very, very difficult for him. And as a result, we can go through and catch our training partner at the ankle. We now have the perfect cross ashigarami position with laced ankles. When he tries to move from here, it's very, very difficult. As we saw in the earlier segments, my real goal now will be to get to my training partner's primary leg at the heel and go into the heel hooking game. Initially, we can just control our training partner's legs and go into lace legs, etc., etc. We can go into attack Achilles locks, heel hooks on the secondary leg, but ultimately, as we saw in the previous sequences or segments, we'll be looking to heel hook this leg. This is an easy way for us to go from one good position to an even better one. Once again, working with my training partner here, we catch up and bring his foot over the top. I bring my knee in as a wedge. When he tries to recover his leg position, it's extraordinarily difficult from this position. From here, it's not a difficult thing for us to go under and control and keep both legs in a position where it's hard for him to extend either leg. When I separate my training partner's legs, watch my right knee pop inside. My left knee goes inside my training partner's ankle like so, and I hold on with this 2-on-1 grip. When he goes to pull away from me, it's shockingly difficult. You have excellent control of your training partner's legs. Initially, we bring the two legs in nice and close. I could go directly for a lace leg attack here, or perhaps more realistically, we'll go into the various sequences that enable us to cover our training partner's heel and finish with inside heel hooks. Most of the time now, my opponent will be trying to turn in this direction, and we'll work, as we saw in the earlier segments, from this position. We've been looking at the broad structure of this leg lock system. We've seen that really what people call the leg lock system in actuality is 3 subsystems that are linked together. When it's time to actually go out on the mat and wrestle someone and try to leg lock them, you're going to be using one of those 3 subsystems as your means of actually establishing contact with your opponent and going through to a win. A really interesting question is to ask, what's the relationship between the 3 subsystems? Okay, obviously structurally they're very different. Okay, cross ashigarami has a very different mechanism of control and a very different mechanism of finishing from straight ashigarami. And you could say the same about reverse Ashigurami. Nonetheless, there are strong links between all three. Whenever people come to study leg locks with me, often they ask me one question, which is, okay, your system is based around a hierarchy. Why don't I just focus on the apex of that hierarchy? If the number one method of attack is the cross Ashigurami inside heel hook, why don't I just spend all my time on that? That's the best one. Well, the truth is, you're going to get the best results out of the leg locking system by having moves that work in unison to create dilemmas. It's very important we go over what is the nature of a dilemma and why is it so important for not only the leg lock system, but jiu-jitsu in general. I always say to my students, good jiu-jitsu players create problems for their opponents, but great jiu-jitsu players don't create problems, they create dilemmas. What's the difference? Every problem has a solution. Dilemmas don't really have solutions. They're just two bad outcomes, and you've got to make a choice between two undesirable outcomes. Whenever we go to work in the sport of jiu-jitsu, our task is not to create problems for our opponent, but as often as possible to create dilemmas. The single most important dilemma in the leg lock system is the dilemma between the threat of outside heel hooks and the threat of inside heel hooks, between the threats that come from straight Ashigurami and the threats that come from cross Ashigurami. The interplay between these two is what creates so many of the breakthroughs for my students. The only way you're going to have a devastating set of attacks for inside heel hooks is to be strong with your outside heel hooks. And the only way you're going to have devastating attacks with your outside heel hooks is to have a strong, viable threat of inside heel hooks. The two function in the same way that a jab and a cross function in boxing. One sets up the other. You can only avoid one by exposing yourself to the other. If you only focus on one, you're going to quickly become predictable and your opponent will be able to position himself in certain ways that block your attacks. But when you can threaten both back to back, your opponent's reaction to one will always open up the other. This is the basis of dilemma theory in the leg locking game. Let's start to look now in practical terms at how this plays out. We know that our number one method of entering into our training partner's legs is the so-called Arimi Ashigurami. This is the basis of our entry pattern. I have an opponent on two knees. From any method of entering in, let's say an elevation method, we get our opponent up and we go into an Arimi Ashigurami, like so. Now, once we get into this position, the central guide as to where the action will go in the next few seconds is always betrayed by my opponent's head. The manner in which his head goes to move will determine how I go to attack the leg. Many of your opponents threatened with this position will move the head away in an attempt to put a foot on the buttocks and scoot out and escape what they think is the threat of an initial outside heel hook. Okay? We saw when we looked at the outside heel hook system, this is not really a particularly effective way of operating. Whenever I see Kyle Masaru's head move away, look what happens to his ankle. The ankle becomes exposed. Remember, we're always looking for some method of exposing our training partner's heels. Okay? The moment the head moves away, it can only happen in a way where it exposes my training partner's heel. When I see the head move away, I simply cover the shoelaces with my bicep and lock up. From here, we switch from the Arimi Ashigurami and lock. When he tries to move away from me, I'm pointing my knees at the floor. It's so easy now to apply pressure, roll through, make the switch to an outside Ashigurami, and now we're in a strong breaking position. So the first one of the dilemma was based on situations where my opponent's head moves away from me. If the head moves away, he will always expose himself at the heel and lead directly into the straight Ashigurami system, which involves a switch of various Ashiguramis, culminating in an outside Ashigurami and a strong breaking position. Pretty soon, your opponent's going to figure that out. And they're going to realize that when the head moves away, the heel becomes exposed. So they're all going to do the same thing. They're going to bring the head back to face us and put the heel on the floor. And as a result, there's no heel exposure. However, this comes at a very heavy price. Yes, I don't have heel exposure, but I can always lock up the ankle. Now I put my left foot on my training partner's left buttock, the so-called cross buttock position. My right foot goes through and hooks onto the front of my training partner's quadricep. If I can, I always like to grip my training partner at the head. If my opponent's head is so far away that I can't do it, that's fine. I can do it without it. Now, I want to lift and elevate my opponent by bringing my knees up to my chest. This will have an immediate destabilizing effect on my training partner. As a result, his hips go directly over my head. We now use what we call a hand assist. There's a danger of my opponent lifting his leg high so that I can't get my knee behind it as a wedge. A hand assist prevents this from happening. I catch the knee, so when he goes to lift high, he can't do it. And as a result, I can easily pull my knee behind his as a wedge. Now when he tries to rise, there's nowhere to go. Now, we know that our next step is to break our training partner down to a hip. The correct directionality of force is always across the hip line. His base of support is his hands, but when I go across the line of the hips, there's simply no base of support. His ankles are tied together, and as a result, we can easily tilt our training partner down to the mat. What we've got here is a true dilemma. As I enter the Arumi Ashigarami position, my opponent can either move away from me and expose his heel to the outside Ashigarami system, or square up to me and expose himself to the cross Ashigarami system. Let's look at some examples of this happening. For a situation like tight with my training partner, we draw the mat in, we go immediately into the legs. I see Kamasa's head move away, we roll through and finish. My opponent learns, goes to square up to me. From here, I go cross buttock position, watch my right foot pommel through and go to my training partner's hips. If possible, I catch my training partner by the head. If not, that's fine. Now, we bring knees to chest, and we bring our opponent's body into a situation where I can easily hand assist, catch, and put my knee behind his. Now I push along the line of the hips, to sit my opponent down into a winning position. This simple dilemma, based on my opponent's head position, whether the head moves away or whether the head moves towards me, is the basis of how we use these two in unison to create attacking opportunities. My opponent has to go one or the other. The head has to either move away from me or towards me. In either case, it leads into a devastating Ashigarami-based heel hook attack. When I see my opponent moving in towards me, it's so important that my foot go to this, the cross buttock position. The second foot comes through and locks as a tight grip on my training partner's quadricep. This is essentially an X guard in reverse. Now from here, even when my opponent puts his weight back and away from me, it's not a difficult thing for me to bring knees to chest. That starts the ball rolling and gets him close to me. The last element is the extension of my legs that brings his hips directly over my head and my lower back off the floor. When he goes to pull away from me, I just hold the knee and the hand assist pulls him into a winning position. And from here, pushing across the hips creates a perfect attacking position, an ankle lace cross Ashigarami that's extremely difficult for my opponent to get away from. We're looking at the idea of bringing the notion of dilemmas into leg locking in particular and jiu-jitsu in general. I always say this: good players create problems for their opponents, great players create dilemmas. We just looked at one of the foundational dilemmas of our leg lock system based around our opponent's reaction, which is visible through their head position. When they move away from us, they're going to expose their own heel to the outside straight Ashigarami game. When their head moves towards us and they square up, they're going to expose their entire hip, both hips, to the cross Ashigurami game. Let's look now at other ways in which dilemmas start to play an important role in the leg lock system. If we have an opponent in any given Ashigurami, let's say for example cross Ashigurami, sitting down, there's always going to be those times where you feel you're about to lose control of your opponent's knee as it slips out of your knee line. Okay? Say for example I'm working here and Kawamoto does a good job of turning and rotating, and essentially now I've lost the position. Okay, the knee is now free. Okay, so once again, from any situation where I have a given Ashigurami on my opponent, here I'm demonstrating with cross Ashigurami, I need to have his knee inside my knee line. He knows that, and he will often be thumb posting, turn the other way, thumb posting, pushing out, etc., etc. Whenever I feel I'm going to lose my training partner's leg on one side, it's up to me to create a dilemma by threatening the other side. Okay? So if I feel the knee is starting to come out and I'm losing control of it, I will often in these circumstances willingly put my foot out. As the leg continues out, now it's up to me to go into a very special grip. I thread my hand through and around, and I pommel and I take a scoop grip on my training partner's leg. The key element to a scoop grip is that my hand goes above my training partner's knee and my elbow flares up to control my training partner's lower leg. So the upper leg is controlled by hand and wrist, and the lower leg is controlled by elbow. As Kawamoto squares up to me and goes to pull away, walking back on his hands, look how far Carl has gotten away from me. It means nothing. Even with his other foot pressing into the floor, I can always draw him back to me. This is a shockingly strong and intimidating grip. I'll do this again. Even as Kawamoto moves away from me, it looks like I'm completely losing control of his body. But because both upper body and lower body are well controlled, even when he pushes off the floor with hand, you can pull him back in like a child. Once again, he moves away. Now, once we get that pull, it's nothing special on my part, it's just the structure of the human body. Just draw him back in. I want to do this with my legs in a better position. Okay? So, I had a cross Ashigurami situation with my training partner. He did a good job of escaping his knee from my knee line. Okay? I can see what's happening. I'm losing the knee. It does take a rocket science to figure this out. I put in my grip and step out. He goes to move away from me. He thinks he's in safety because the knees are moving further and further away. He's moving away. He's all the way at the end of my grip, almost gone. And yet, it means nothing. I can start to draw him in. As I draw him in, I put my foot to the inside position and I bring him right back into a position where I can go on the attack. Okay? As he comes in, I like, always in these circumstances, to pass my foot over and switch my arms. I keep my body high, and as a result, we can make switches up into another one of our systems, the reverse Ashigurami. Of course, from reverse Ashigurami, we know what our opponent wants to do. He'll lock up his legs defensively. Okay? We've seen it from situations like this. It's not difficult for us to fall down to the floor and go in to attack our opponent's leg. He goes to kick out and gives us the second leg for a knee bar win. You can see there's a sense here in which your opponent can only escape one leg by exposing the other. The legs are so close to each other that it almost always means whenever I lose one leg, the other one is there for the taking. This creates incredible opportunities to get these simple dilemmas to work in your favor anytime you feel you're losing legs. Here, we have a straight Ashigurami situation. I feel Kawamoto is doing a good job of pushing the foot down and starting to thread over my legs. As he comes in over my legs, there's always going to be exposure on the second leg. Okay? From here, I can draw my training partner in towards me, and I can go into an Ashigurami on the straight Ashigurami on the second leg, or I can keep the scoop grip and from here spin around my training partner's leg and go across Ashigurami on the second leg. Your choice. Always bear in mind, you've got two legs in front of you, not one. So many athletes grab a hold of one leg and they get a tunnel vision where all they see is the leg in front of them. Never forget, he's got two legs. They're right next to each other. If you lose one, just go to the other leg. Your best friend in any of these exchanges is the so-called scoop grip, which means that no matter how far your opponent gets away from you, you can always draw him back to you with minimal effort. No matter how many times he moves away, it's the easiest thing to bring him back. So as I feel my opponent breaking my ashigarami and stepping over the top, it's an easy thing for me to thread back into the second leg. It's easy because the two legs are right next to each other. I can work from here. Let's look at one simple example. I lose ashigarami on my training partner's left leg, but gain it on the right. From here, we roll through and end up in a breaking position on the second leg. This is another sense in which we can create simple dilemmas in almost any given leg lock situation. Not so much by a technical element, it's just a mental element of identifying the simple fact that the two legs are right next to each other. Whenever one escapes, the second is there for the taking. We've gone over a large amount of theory with regards to the various elements of the general and subsystems that make up the entire leg lock system. It's time now to get into practical applications. Movements that we often use in training and in competition to enter into the legs and to get to a decisive winning position. In truth, I could sit here for months and show you 1,000 different entries. What I want to do is to give you, in a practical sense, a sampler of ways to enter in practical fashions into leg locks from standing position, from ground positions on bottom, ground positions on top, and from the so-called double-seated position where both athletes are sitting down in front of each other. I can't show you the entire library of moves that we use in this position. It simply wouldn't fit on any DVD series. But what I can do is show you some of the more practical ones which we use every day in training and use them to illustrate some of the concepts and tactics and insights which you can then employ in other areas in these 4 different contexts yourselves. Let's look now at one of my favorite ways to enter into the legs from standing position. This particular method gained considerable attention when it was used very, very successfully by Gary Tonin in a spectacular battle of leg locking expertise between himself and the great Kuzma Palhares. My concern as a coach when Gary went to fight Palhares was the enormous discrepancy in size and strength. Palhares is not only a very good leg locker, he's also very adept at takedowns, especially lifting, slamming takedowns. And one of my concerns was that if Gary got into upper body tie-ups with Mr. Palhares, he would come off second best every single time. So I taught him what we call the sliding ashigarami entry, where from no tie-up whatsoever, neither athlete has a grip on the other, you slide into your legs. This is the equivalent in jiu-jitsu leg locking terms of a shot in wrestling, where you have no tie-up and you shoot from a distance for a takedown. The grip we use is similar to a high crotch, but the end result is obviously very, very different. In the situation standing, where I notice my opponent has his right foot forward, and I also have my right foot forward. Okay, so we have the same lead foot. I come out with my training partner, and I start by putting my head down just above the height of my training partner's hips. I don't care if he stays high or if he comes down with me, it's going to make no difference. Okay? The distance that I work with here is usually at a distance where I have hands on my training partner and I take a step, and with a step I will be able to reach the inside of my training partner's lead knee. Okay? When I make my step, my chest comes down towards my lead leg, similar to a shot, but rather than shoot towards my knees, ultimately I want to shoot down onto my hips. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to reach and I'm going to catch at my training partner's knee. How you catch is extremely important. I want to catch the whole tendon on the inside of the back of my training partner's knee. So my hand locks like so. Make sure your fingers are together for a strong grip. I come in and there's the initial catch. When Kamasaro goes to pull his leg back, it's shockingly difficult. Now, all I do is I put my hand right in front of my training partner's toes. As the hand catches the knee and the hand catches the toes, I now get an ability to slide. When I make that slide, I don't want to slide onto my back. I want to slide onto my side. I have to make sure that I present enough space between our 2 feet that my hips can slide through that space. I don't want to step too close to my opponent's foot Now there's no space for me to slide through. So from an initial situation with my training partner, I come out with my right foot forward. Often I'll post with my other hand. When I measure distance with my post hand, now I step onto my training partner's center line. Off that step, the two hands catch, and I slide onto my hip. As I do that, I pull them forward onto me. Now we're in the perfect position, blocking the foot to throw our legs straight up into the Ashigarami. As always, I look at my opponent's head. If my opponent goes to escape in this direction, we attack, block, and finish with outside Ashigarami. I move out. From here, you can clearly see my training partner's center line. I step to the center line. I use a post hand to enable me to get there. Now, penetration step and the catch. My chest goes down, the catch, plant, watch my hip, I slide onto my side. I do not go onto my back. Then when I pull, he gets mounted. Obviously, that's not what we want. I pull in such a way that my head is outside his leg, so that when I pull, his body goes across me, not on top of me. Now from here, I throw my legs. I look at his reaction. If the head moves away, we go in. If the head moves towards, we lock, lift, and put him down. Once again, a sliding Ashigarami shot. I move towards my training partner. I post. I step to the center line. Off the center line, I level change. I go in, catch, pull, and the legs go in. And we've got to finish. We're looking at practical applications, entering into various Ashigarami from standing position. We just saw one very, very effective method that didn't involve tying up with our opponent. Nonetheless, most of the time when we go to enter our opponent's legs from standing position, it involves some kind of tie-up. Okay? Probably the single most common form of tie-up in both wrestling and jiu-jitsu is collar ties. Okay? Whether they're initiated by us or by someone else. When Kawasawa comes out and collar ties me, most of the time I don't like to see athletes working with neutral collar ties, where he has a collar tie in me and I have a collar tie in him. It's kind of a neutral position where it's difficult to get through the takedown, so we essentially have the same grip on each other. Okay? I much prefer to see asymmetrical grips where we have different grips upon each other. Nonetheless, for the purpose of entering the legs, both of us having a collar tie at the same time is not a bad thing. In fact, it can actually be quite useful. What we'll do here is we have an opponent with his feet apart, like so. We're going to take our opponent's leg and square him up to us. What I don't want is Kawasawa reaching for my legs as I'm trying to get my game going here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get a hold of my training partner's tricep and hold, so that I know he can't use his right arm to reach my legs because I'm underneath it. If he's going to reach my legs, it's going to have to be the other arm. Okay? Now, I'm going to square my opponent up to us by circling away from the far leg and pulling. So I step, circle, and pull. So I square my training partner up. Now, from the situation, I want to step in so that I get the inside position with my right foot. Once my right foot attains the inside position, we're ready to go. The only impediment is going to be my opponent's collar tie inside like this. Okay? So we need an effective method of clearing this hand off. How are we going to do this? When my opponent has a collar tie, I'm going to put my hand inside like so. So my hand comes in. If my opponent is strong, I will not be able to simply pull the hand off. So what I need to do is to walk away from my opponent's arm. So I move and walk, and now the arm is cleared. Now I circle and pull my training partner up. I'm in the perfect position now to step my foot inside his, and then I fall not towards the leg that I want to attack, but I point my leg across the second leg, like so. Watch as I fall, my leg goes in this direction. I never want to fall underneath my opponent. I want to fall out to the side at an angle, so that my head is outside his leg. That is an incredibly important detail. Now from here, I throw my legs up into the ashigarami. And as always from here, it's the same principle. I look at his head. If the head moves away, the heel will be exposed, and we go into the straight ashigarami system. If my opponent squares up to me, we put a cross buttock position, foot in place, and from here, lift and drop our opponent down into the cross ashi system. Either way, we're in a winning position. Let's have a look at this again. We have an opponent, he comes out and locks up the collar tie. I don't want a situation where we both have the same grip. So I'm going to put my hand in and I walk away from my training partner's collar tie. Now I'm in a perfect position to step and circle so I can get my foot in the inside position. Now, retaining my grips, I do not grab the leg. I take my left leg across. I don't step in towards the leg that I want. Watch the path and direction of my left leg goes outwards so that I never fall underneath my opponent. Now my legs fire up. When he tries to work from here, how I go to work will always depend on the direction of my opponent, which will be told to me by the direction his head is moving. Here, Kawasawa has elected to come into me. That means it makes more sense for me to go into the cross ashigarami system. So we start an action of lifting and getting our opponent out of balance. We take our second foot, thread through and around, elevate, and drop him down to the mat. Let's have a look at how this move can go wrong. The single most common mistake I see is people do a good job of squaring the man up, but then they fall underneath their opponent and get squashed. The mistake they made is they fell with their head and shoulders inside their opponent's legs. That's not what we want. We want to fall in such a way that my head is outside the legs and I'm lined up across his body, not inside his legs, where if he falls, he tends to fall on top of me. So, from a standing start, we tie it up, I clear my training partner's arm, I square him up. I step in on my training partner and watch how he go across the body. And as a result, it's a relatively simple thing. Put him up into a winning position. We're looking at some practical, simple, standing entries into the leg lock ashigarami game from standing position. Probably the single most common stance that my opponent takes is one where he's relatively bent over and the hands are in front just like so. This creates conditions where my opponent's hands are the part of my opponent's body that are closest to me. Okay? This makes it very natural in grappling situations for people to come out and start tying up at the wrist as a first point of contact. It's very natural because the hands are the closest thing to me. It's usually the first thing I end up grabbing. Okay? Because of this, arm dragging has become a very, very useful and popular form of engaging in tie-ups and attack in the standing position in both wrestling and jiu-jitsu. Arm drags are not only a superb way of getting takedowns and taking your opponent's back, they're also a great way of entering into the legs. When my opponent's in here, I'm going to match my head level with his, and I'm going to tie up my training partner at the wrists. From here, I'm going to go in and drag on my training partner, not with the intention of going into my opponent's legs for the takedown, but going into the legs for ashigarami. What's required here is a penetration step, just like a takedown, a grip on my training partner's leg, just like a takedown, but a very different finish. The arm drag gives me the perfect angle to shoot past my opponent's far leg. Remember, everything goes past and behind the far leg. From here, I grip the leg and I shoot through, use the drag to get the perfect attacking angle on my training partner. As always, my intention is to get my head outside my opponent's leg. As a result, I can quickly fire up into the ashigarami position. From here, I track my opponent's head. If it moves away, the heel will be exposed, and we go into a winning position. Remember, our ultimate goal is always to get our head outside our opponent's lead leg. If I fall in between my opponent's legs, there's a real danger of pulling him into bad positions. Okay? You are going to your back after all. So it's very, very important. I fall across my opponent's body, where his body weight goes across mine, as opposed to on top of mine. That means anytime his body goes across, it's the easiest thing in the world for me to go into a variation of Hashigurami in a winning position. The arm drag makes this particularly easy because it opens a direct door to the space behind his back leg. In a situation where he's bent over like so, I go in, that's the direction I want, right past the back leg. When I catch, look on my leg, goes straight towards the back leg. That gives me the perfect attacking angle to lock up. This time, I promise how it turns to face me, so I put the crossbody hook in, lift, catch, and drop.